Julie, you are the CEO of Vousfinancer, which is a national franchise network specializing in credit brokerage. You have several areas of activity: real estate financing, professional financing, debt consolidation, and borrower insurance. I believe there are 135 branches in France and 450 advisors. And then, while preparing for this interview, you emphasized your brand's and your team's commitment to standing out from the competition, to focusing on a human and personalized approach with your clients, because these are important moments. Loans can be quite large, especially if you're buying in Paris. And you were also voted Best Credit Brokerage Brand, and I believe this is the 4th time this year.
Absolutely.
Julie, what were the reasons for you to seek financing, and for you and your team? The goals, the project that led you to consider a conversational AI?
So I took over as director of Vousfinancer 5 years ago. And as part of that, we worked with the whole team on a 3-year strategic plan. This led to the launch of several initiatives, one of which was called Being a Driver of Innovation. And in that particular initiative, in which we involved our franchisees, one of the key areas identified was how to move forward. How could we increase the volume of leads and also improve their quality? Since we invest in CE and also work a lot on SEO, one of our sources of business is online leads. People who potentially have a project and who browse the websites of various brokers, including ours. And indeed, one way to improve the qualification of a lead is to score it, for example, and to encourage our franchisees and all network members to say, if your lead has a score of 85%, prioritize it over a lead that only meets 20% of the criteria we've set. So that was really the main reason. And then the second reason was also a desire to stand out from the competition, as you mentioned earlier, and to improve our brand image, since we had done a little mapping. We looked at the practices across all our competitors' websites, and it turns out that everyone qualifies leads in the same way, through a rather tedious form where you have to select answers and so on. So we thought that a virtual assistant, because that's what we called it, it would also improve the experience for a prospect in the way they could get started, their interaction with a member of the network. You finance, so there was also an intention to work a bit on modernity and innovation.
So I believe you have several AIs running, several assistants that have been operating for 3 years now, 4 years.
Yes, 4 years.
4 years. What was the process to take action to make it go live?
So it's true that we have 3 assistants running. The first 2 are mainly focused on the recruitment side. Recruitment for our agency's internal staff and recruitment for us of new franchisees. Those ones, I'm not going to talk about them the most because that's really what had already been done. It was SoWhat AI's expertise when we met them. Where it was more innovative was actually on the prospect qualification side, since that was not something they were used to doing at all. And it's that assistant that really required the most work from us. For the other 2, it was more like, okay, what are the questions? But in this case, we were extremely guided on the questions, etc. But for the rest, so here, we worked in several stages since we started from our form. So how do we translate this form into a conversation? Once that was done, how did we define or determine the priority projects or client profiles for us? We translated all of that into X thousands of scenarios. And so I checked earlier, it was still nearly 400,000 different possibilities. So we had to figure out the percentages. And precisely how in the midst of all these possible paths, since each answer leads to another question, etc. So with 400,000 possibilities, we could never have done it by hand, saying for this one we want a score of 80%, for that one we want a score of 20%. So we worked on all of this together with the sales teams and the IT teams and Stéphane, who was also very involved in this project. So we determined the elite profiles we wanted to receive and those we no longer wanted to receive. And so that was also quite new for us. So there were cases where we said to ourselves, there's no point in burdening our agencies with profiles that don't fit what we want to do. For example, we do real estate loans and someone who is unemployed, we're going to have a hard time finding a solution for them. So rather than sending those profiles to the agencies who wouldn't have done anything with them and would have told us, there's no point in sending me this because it's really useless, those profiles are still handled. Whereas before they weren't, but now they're handled by AI, by SoWhat AI's tools. They receive an email, we nurture them, we tell them that for now we can't help, but they shouldn't hesitate to come back to us if their situation changes. We follow up with them regularly for 6 months, and that allows not to miss out on certain profiles that at the moment don't fit what we're looking for, but who might be a good fit later on. And here, for that matter, if you manage sales networks, you know very well that your advisors never nurture the leads they receive if those leads don't immediately fit into what they're interested in. So we set up this nurturing, put in place emails that would alert and raise awareness within our network about the fact that when a lead reached 85%, we translated that into a star rating. They really had every reason to contact them right away. And then we ran a test phase on a portion of our SIE investments. And then after that, we did a full production rollout. That's it.
And all of that, how long did it take?
It does take a bit of time, all of that, because on top of that, we're not a big organization. But I would say that between the first meeting and the production rollout, it took almost 6 months or so. That's it.
For all three?
Yes, so there were 2 that were actually really quick to do on that part. HR, really, it was wrapped up in just a few days.
And what was the impact on the teams, on the clients, on the prospects? I think you sent me yesterday some results that were actually quite good, in fact.
So the first impact, my business is as a franchisor, so it's about offering services and support to my network of franchisees. So the first impact was with our franchisees. And here we're dealing with something that's more about perception. And so their perception is really that the leads they receive are of better quality. That doesn't necessarily show up in the results, but perception is important because I'm selling services to my network. And so they feel like they're receiving higher quality leads. It's true because in fact, all those who don't fit the scope at all, they no longer receive them. So the ones they do receive are supposed to be actual leads. Presumably interesting for them, especially when they're 3-star leads, 3 stars being the maximum. That's the first level. The second is actually that of the end user, I would say, so the prospect. And there we have satisfaction surveys that are conducted, since at the end of the form, we ask them if they'd like to give their feedback. So that's still more than 25,000 prospects who have responded to this satisfaction survey. 25,000, that's 30% of those who have already used the virtual assistant. And here we have 80% of ratings at 4 and 5 out of 5, with feedback saying it's smooth, simple, and efficient. So there's really a positive perception as well from potential clients. So this really helps us work on our brand image. And then I would say that the third advantage for our internal teams as a franchisor is also greater agility. In the way we can redirect the allocation of our SIE budgets. Since we have a lot of data that allows us to say, at the moment, by investing, we're mostly going to get pre-consumer leads. But right now, we don't want to focus on pre-consumer. So we can quickly reallocate the investments we make on keywords and so on. And act on our investment strategy much faster than we could before, since with our old-fashioned forms, we didn't have all this data feedback that allowed us to say no, but now we're not where we want to be right away. And so we can adapt more quickly.
Great. So after these 4 years of experience and use, what would be the 2 or 3 lessons you could share with people in the audience who are thinking, hey, maybe this is something that could interest me?
Well, I'm being broad because I see I have 1 minute left, 20 seconds, so that's perfect. The 3 lessons I could share, the first is to never think that once the assistant is in production, the project is finished. Far from it, actually. When you put the assistant into production, that's really just the very beginning of the project, even if you've already spent 6 months on it beforehand, because the real power and relevance of this tool lies in its ability to analyze data. That's really the whole principle of artificial intelligence, how it learns on its own from what has been implemented. So for now, it doesn't go so far as to give us advice, but it's still very important to analyze the results in order to continuously improve SoWhat AI so that it remains suited to our needs. This leads to the second lesson, which is that you need teams that are sufficiently skilled and efficient to properly analyze all this data. And it's true that for me, that's something I'm lacking today. I can see on the platform that there are plenty of things we could analyze to adapt to be even more effective and relevant, but I don't do it because I don't have a data analyst, for example. And it turns out that I didn't follow point 1. I thought it was done once it was launched, but it's not. So just know that this isn't a one-shot undertaking. Once it's in production, it's not over. And then my third piece of advice, I've gone over time, oops, is that if you want to get into this, it's always better to do it with professional, committed, and competent teams.